you should take the approach that you're wrong. Your goal is to be less wrong. What Elon Musk said for the automotive industry, we try to apply to our construction projects. I'll take you on a journey through one of our large-scale construction projects. 7 involved trades, more than 50,000 collisions avoided, more than 50 engineers involved, and 6 different authoring systems for all BIM and CAD data. This is the range and the scale of the construction project we were involved with about a year ago. The main goal of our client was to reduce collisions. Not only to reduce them, but to get to a collision-free construction site. The main goal was defined, collision-free construction site. So one of the biggest questions posed to us was, how should collaboration work? How should the involved trades work together on the construction site? How should the involved trades work together in the planning phase of the building? On answering this question, we went through a couple of common data environments and experimented with a couple of them. We tried around a bit and concluded that BIM 360 Coordinate was up for the job. BIM 360 Coordinate was the platform we were going to use to coordinate the complete project. BIM 360 was the platform we were aiming for to achieve 0 collisions on the construction site. BIM 360 is ISO compliant, so it matches expectations set down by the ISO standards. After choosing BIM 360, we went down and wrote down our BIM execution plan. In the BIM execution plan, we stated how the different levels of leadership should use the common data environment, how the different trades should use the common data environment, how the engineers should use the common data environment to work together and to share information with each other. In the BIM execution plan, we also defined how to do training. Which parties will get training and which trades will have to receive and give training for things like the BIM process, for things like the common data environment, and for similar things. The idea was good, but remember, the goal is to be less wrong. That's why we've compiled a couple of best practices from our large-scale construction project and from a couple of international studies and best practices. Let's look at them. Best practice number 1, training. Training is important. Training allows everybody on the project to be on the same page. Training was employed first in World War I when there was a need to train a huge amount of people to the same level, to get them on the same page. We employ training on a couple of levels. The engineers received training, the leadership positions received training. And one major point we've seen during training is that training can't be a lecture. A lecture is great for the university, a lecture is great for keeping people entertained on television, but a lecture is not the tool for training in construction. Another important point to focus on in the topic of training, you have to involve everybody. Every now and then we see projects where only the engineers are being trained, or only leadership positions are being trained. It doesn't work that way. You have to train everybody involved in the project. There can't be a senior position somewhere writing letters by hand on a piece of paper. You have to train everybody. Best practice number 2. You have to do small pilot projects. Why small? Because when you fail quick and you fail cheap. You can summarize why you failed, you can find out what worked and what didn't work. The things that worked, amazing, take them and put them into lessons learned. Apply these lessons learned quickly to any new projects, and you have a recipe for success. It's very important to take these lessons learned from old pilot projects and apply them to new ones. We regularly see companies failing on this step to apply lessons learned quickly. Best practice number 3. You can't use old escalation paths. Why? Old escalation paths are a thing of the past. Old escalation paths are defined by contracts, are defined by legal terms, are defined by how projects worked in the past. You have to imagine new escalation paths. You have to imagine new escalation paths because information is democratized. Information is free in this new economy, and you can't use old escalation paths anymore. To the next best practice. No tender phase without BIM. A couple of companies make the error that they think, okay, tender phase is defined by legal arguments, by lawyers, and by legal things. The construction and the planning side of things is more technical, and you have to use other people for that. So the companies separate these two things and make the mistake of not involving building information modeling and a new kind of collaboration into their tender phase and tender documents. That's the main mistake. Please involve your BIM teams with the legal teams doing tendering, doing the legal drawings, doing the legal documents, and doing the legal side of things. But don't over-involve them. You can't define everything in the tender phase. You can't set everything down because you're going to have different companies, you're going to have different planning tools, you're going to have a huge range of possibilities which you would have to define in the tender phase if you want to define everything. Don't try to define everything. After the tender phase, make sure that you test collaboration as much as possible. Other industries are great at this. Test collaboration as much as possible after the tender phase. Why? Because if a huge construction file arrives late in the process and your common data environment breaks because of the size, you're not going to find out probably, and some elements will get lost. That's why please test your collaboration with huge files, test them with complex files, test them with files from old projects. You're not going to regret it. The next best practice, business processes will need to change. Business processes take long to change, they are hard to change, we do know that, but please change them. Why? There's no possibility for current construction companies with the efficiencies they have, with the processes they have, to survive in the new age of construction. They're going to have to change massively. This massive change has to happen by a person who gets the authority and who knows everything regarding the company. We do know that the change of business practices takes a long time. There have been multiple industries who have been involved in huge waves and huge changes. And we can take a look at them to see how long it takes. For example, the shipbuilding industry took 15 years to change. The aircraft industry, 25 years. And automotive industry, 40 years. That's a huge timeline for change. We in the construction industry are at the beginning of change, at the beginning of the democratization of information. And that's the important change we are currently facing. In our large-scale construction project, we managed to do this change, or at least part of this change, in 1 year with one success story. We delivered our client a nice, meaningful and working process for collaboration. We delivered the necessary trainings and everything worked out great. The construction site is currently ongoing and we're not facing any big difficulties. How did we do it? We had a huge amount of investments in people, we had a huge amount of investments in processes, and we also had a huge amount of investment in tools. Without these kinds of big investments, it wouldn't be possible to make these kinds of changes in one construction project in such a short period of time. Together, we can keep the time of change short and as short as possible. Let's do this. Thank you.